Hello, and welcome to my essential guide for football managers who are just starting this game. Now, my goal for this video is to get you introduced to all the very little important nitty-gritties of this game that can make a huge difference throughout the season. I'll be going over a variety of topics, including player morale, scouting, transfers and contracts, squad registration, medical information, training, and the data hub. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't list tactics in that list, and that's because it would take a whole other video to explain the tactics in their entirety. Now, if you need help starting the game or setting it up, go ahead and click on that link to my other video and it will explain all of that. Without further ado, let's jump into what I consider the most important topic on this list: player morale. The best way to analyze your team's morale is by checking this Dynamics tab right over here on the side. And as you can see on the overview section, we get plenty of information right off the bat. And we can see our team cohesion, our club atmosphere, and our leadership support, and pros and cons that come from the status that we have in each of those. We can also see our top influencers here on the left-hand side. Here it's Davide Calabria and Teo Hernandez are two team leaders. Also see the different social groups that we have at the club and the issues. And we have a few of them. Now, you want to be very careful on how many player issues you begin to rack up, because one unhappy player could lead to a snowball effect where they drag a whole bunch of other players down with them and you could lose the locker room. Now, as you can see on this save, the club atmosphere is average and the little arrow here says that it is dropping. Now, that is because Alexis Saelemaekers here has caused a huge fuss about being left out of the UEFA Champions League registration. And as you can see here, it says that there are 10 players that agree with him. If we want to get a better understanding of this, we can go over to our happiness tab, and you can see all of the players that are supporting Alexis Saelemaekers. And if you haven't noticed, all the players that are supporting him all have a lower morale than the rest of their teammates. Like down here, everybody's excellent. Up here, they're simply really good. Now, if I hadn't been winning a lot of the matches in this particular save, the morale would be a lot lower. It's very important to be very careful in this situation. Otherwise, it could lead to a locker room mutiny and you could lose your job. Now, there are a number of ways that players can become unhappy. And if we look at our issues list right here, there are 4 different reasons. Rade Krunic wants to go on loan so he can secure a permanent move. De Ketelaere is upset because we had broken too many promises. Lorenzo Colombo is concerned because he wants a new deal after becoming a first-team player. And, of course, Saelemaekers is upset being left out of the Champions League squad. Now, if you want to avoid making players unhappy, there are a few key things that you must pay attention to. Number 1, don't make unnecessary promises. A lot of players will ask you for certain promises, and if you can, just get rid of all of those. Don't make any promises that you can't absolutely keep. Number 2, pay attention to their expected playing time. Not giving a player their expected playing time could make them unhappy very, very quickly. And number 3, pay attention to their contract demands. Every season, you will have players that will want a new contract for various reasons. It's very important to talk with those players and get the contract situation sorted out as soon as possible. In order to monitor those 3 things, make sure you're paying attention to this happiness tab in the Dynamics screen. If a player is unhappy, concerned, or dissatisfied in any of those 3 categories, you will see it here. Leao, for instance, is dissatisfied with the situation at the club, very likely because of the Saelemaekers situation. If you stay on top of this, you could avoid any headaches that you would have otherwise incurred. Now, what's really important is to realize that you're not going to win everybody over. There are always going to be players that are unhappy with the club or some situation that's going on. But that's okay, because there are ways to manage the team, even if there is some drama in the locker room. Let's take Theo Hernandez as an example, since he is supporting his teammate and his morale is not perfect. If we click on him, bring up his player page, we can go to discuss, and we can praise the player. And we can praise a variety of things. We can praise his recent form. We can praise his last game, his training, or his conduct. Now, you can't just do all of these at once. They'll actually get upset if you start praising them too often and too inconsistently. The best thing to do is to space them out and to give them at the appropriate times. You don't want to praise his last game if he only got a 6.7. Only praise him when he absolutely deserves it. Now, despite praising your players only affecting morale slightly, every little bit counts throughout the season. If you've got a lot of drama in your locker room, this could be just the thing that you need to stabilize it to prevent any sort of mutiny. Now, perhaps you've done everything you could, but your player's still unhappy. What do? It's time to sell them. Now, let's say we are fed up with Alexis Salamakers. How do we sell him? Well, if we go ahead and click on his name, there are a variety of things that we can do. We go over to his transfer tab, and there's a whole bunch of information here. So the very first thing that we can do is go ahead and just put him on the transfer list. The agent says that his client is very interested to speaking to other clubs. Now, if you didn't want to sell him and you just wanted to loan him, you can go ahead and put him available for a loan as well. And in doing that, there's a variety of different things. Say you want some money for this loan. Maybe you want $100K every month for when he's playing and when he's not playing, and you want the club to cover all of his contract. Well, you can make that happen. But instead, let's focus on the transfer status. Now, you can set an asking price. It'll tell you what his transfer value is. It says 17.5 million. Now, maybe you want to up it a little bit and say 20 million and try to get clubs down to about 15 million. Now, you can do this, but the agent is going to have some feedback. And in this case, the agent said that the client is happy with this asking price. So we can go ahead and put that at 20 million and hit confirm. Now, as time goes on, teams will become interested and their interests will be listed here along with their offers. You'll have active interest and even rumor interests. And you'll have the reasons as well. And this is very useful. Now, right now, Everton isn't going to make an offer because the transfer window is closed. But because the transfer window is coming up for the winter, they are actively interested in Salamakers. Now, let's say you've put your player on the transfer list, but nobody's making any offers. What do you do then? The first thing you can do is go up to this tab here. You can put them on the unwanted list, and you could say, sell at the asking price that we set over here. Now, this will add them to the unwanted list, which you can find over here in our transfer tab. You go over here to General Manager and click on the unwanted list, and you can see all the players that we have on here. What this will do is prompt Jeffrey Moncada, our chief scout, to try and sell Salamakers to other clubs. He will offer Salamakers to anybody who might be interested. He will also handle the negotiations and do what it is that you have said that he should do, and in this case, sell for the asking price of 20 million. If any offers come in that are less, he will reject it outright. Another option that you could do is generate market interest for the player. You'll be chatting with his agent and you can say, hey, look, we're curious of selling Salamakers, but only at the right price. So we'd like to know what price looks right now. He said that we can put him up for 25 million euros, which is 5 million euros less than what we have put him up for right now. And you can proceed and tell him that we would like Everton to propose the deal in that case. So we'll do that and we'll end the chat. Now, we know that Everton is unwilling to make an offer while the transfer window is closed, but now that we've got Salamaker's agent involved, they might take the bite a bit quicker. Now, there are a couple of other ways that we could do this. We could also hire an intermediary. Hit yes. And you will see a couple of agents that our director of football has chosen to try and sell the player. Now, we've got a continental agent or a worldwide agent. They do demand a certain fee based off of the expected deal. They give you an idea of when they could expect a deal and how much they think that they could get for him. Now, we want to get the maximum amount here, even though he's taking 1% more. That's absolutely fine. And he is a worldwide agent, so we could get Salamakers out to a wider audience. Go ahead and click confirm. The last thing that we could do is offer via transfer room. You can choose to offer him out as a transfer or a loan. Now, if you just hit offer via transfer room, it will offer out to a ton of clubs. You can also hit other and then type in Everton and select them specifically and offer Salamakers only to Everton because we know that Everton is interested. Now, we can add in a whole bunch of fees or additional clauses, like perhaps we want a percentage of the next sale and we want 20% of the next sale if we were to sell Salamakers. You can include that in this offer. So now we've got our unhappy players or our deadwood sold or loaned out. Now, how do we replace them? It's time for us to go to the scouting tab. Now, this is a very complicated tab, and we could have a whole video just on this. So we are going to simplify this. Instead of learning about all the different recruitment focuses that you could employ, we are simply going to go to staff over here in this tab. We're going to go to responsibilities. We're going to go to scouting, and we're going to make sure that our chief scout is assigning the scouts. This will make sure that in our scouting tab that all of these are set appropriately. Now, you could go and set up all your own scouting recruitments, but as a beginner, this is something you do not need to micromanage just yet. Now, the most important part of this scouting tab is the scouting recommendations. Now, you will see a whole bunch of players on this list that your scouts are either scouting or have already finished scouting. On the right-hand side, you will see how highly your scouts recommend these players. Now, these recommendations are not universal. They come from particular scouts. So if you were to click on one, you would see here that Jeffrey Moncada has scouted Scalvini. And if you doubted his ability to judge the player, you can click on the scout and see that he is, in fact, an excellent scout. So when you are looking at this scouting report, you can feel pretty confident that this player is what he says he is. This goes for his attributes as well. It's up to your scouts to give you an accurate reading of their attributes. Now, let's say it's early in the game and your scouts haven't done a lot of work yet. How do you find players? Well, you can go right up here to the Players tab and you can click in Players in Range. Now, this is going to bring up, in our case, 117,907 players. Now, that is way too many players to sort through, but not only that, but you don't have all the information on them. So what do? We filter this down and we search for some players. That will bring up this screen, and this will help us narrow down that 117,000. Now, perhaps you don't want any players above the age of 30. You can go ahead and click that, and that's already going to bring us down to 104,000. So about 13,000 less. Maybe you're only looking for a striker. So we'll go ahead and sort by strikers. Now we've narrowed down our list by about 10%, only 16,000 players now. Now, perhaps we only want to look at players that our staff has some knowledge of. So we'll go ahead and say, we'll take any players that have a B rating. We click that and we find that it narrowed our 117,000 player search to 20. And look at that. Now we've got 20 strikers that we could choose from that we could possibly bring into our club. If we can sort by the recommended, we've got all of these here. Now, what you could do instead of having to search for all these players again, you can just go ahead and highlight all of these B+ players. And you could say, add selected to the shortlist. And you could say, this is going to be shortlist number 1. And we'll hit OK. Then you can go over to this tab here and hit your shortlist, and voila, they're all right there. Checked. Keep scout reports up to date. Everybody on this shortlist will have their scouting report updated. Otherwise, eventually, if you don't keep up on scouting these players, this scouting report will become out of date. This report was completed in November 1st, 2024, which is about a month ago. So in 6 months, this won't be very useful. It might be a little different depending on how the player has developed. But if we keep this checked, that will always stay up to date, and we will always have a good idea on how these players are doing. All right, so now you've scouted a bunch of players, you've got your short lists made up, and you're ready to put a bid on a player. How do we go about it? Let's take Francesco Esposito, for example here. He's got good heading, good jumping, so we want him in the club. If we highlight over this transfer tab here, there's a variety of different things that we could do. We could ask the agent about the availability. We could make an offer directly right now. We could inquire about the player. We could offer a trial to that player to come over here. Now, in this case, we can't really offer Esposito a trial to our club. Inter won't allow it because he's already a pretty established player. If it was a youth player, maybe, but not Esposito. So let's go ahead and ask the agent about the availability. Hey, we are very interested in Esposito. Can you tell us a little bit about him? And he says, I'm delighted to hear about your interest and that he is very keen on joining AC Milan. And he's given us some important information about signing him. And quite frankly, this looks like it is completely doable. So we'll say thank you so much for the feedback. Only about 10 million euros, it's looking like. Now, before we just go and make an offer, we could make an inquiry to Inter Milan to make sure that we could get this player. So we'll go ahead and put an inquiry in, and then I'll simulate ahead and see what Inter Milan reply with. And Inter have replied. They said that they are willing to let go of Esposito for about 11 million euros. Now let's just pretend that Inter rejected our inquiry right off the bat. Is there anything that we could do? There is. We could go to his player tab, back up here to transfer, and we could declare an interest, whether we want him on loan, for transfer, or as a top target. Now, this could unsettle the player, and you would see it here in the Dynamics tab if you were scouting him. You could go here, and it would say, disappointed that he cannot join AC Milan, and he might start to force his way out of the club. And if he does that, Inter might be willing to let him go. But in reality, they do want 11 million euros for him. And let's say, that's a bit too much for us. Our transfer budget is only 13 million euros right now. So we want to get it down a little bit. We can negotiate this. So let's go ahead and bring this down to maybe 6 million euros. And we could add on some additional fees. We could add on 3 installments over the course of 3 years for 3 million euros, which would be 1 million euros per season. And we could add on another fee. After 50 games, we have to pay 2 million. Now that would add up to 11 million euros altogether, and we would only have to pay 6 this season. So let's go ahead and suggest this. Now, Inter, they've come back with a counter offer. They said, if we're going to do this, if you're not just going to pay us 11 million up front, we want 13 million euros, plus we want a percentage of the next sale. Now, let's say I wanted to avoid this. Now, they've locked this in, which means I can't get rid of this at all right now. If I wanted to avoid this, I would have had to click add. Let's say we don't want selling team contributions. We could do that, and then we could remove and exclude from the negotiations. But we didn't do this. They're demanding this, so we'll say, how about 30? We'll lock this in. and we're just going to bring this down to 13 million, and we'll suggest. And they've accepted, and we can make the offer, and we can officially begin getting this deal through. All right, so I could simulate the game forward and begin the contract negotiations with Esposito, but I'm afraid that'll take too long. So I'm just going to show you how to negotiate a contract with one of the players that is already on the team. Now we know that Lorenzo Colombo wants a new contract, so let's go ahead and offer him one. We can go up to his contract tab, and there are a few different options here. Now we can discuss the contract with the agent to see what it is that he wants. We can ask our director of football to negotiate the contract for us so we don't have to do it, or we can just immediately enter contract negotiations. Let's go ahead and discuss it with the agent, see what he has to say. Now I'm very interested in re-signing Colombo. He would want a long-term contract. That seems to be a very big sticking point. He would want about 3 million euros a season, and he is expected to earn his place over the course of a season. Now that's great feedback. Thank you. We will agree to that, and we'll just go ahead and offer the contract. Now he is going to demand a few promises from us. He wants to be a squad player for now, but next season he wants to be a regular starter. And after that, he wants to be an important player. He's 22 years old, and he thinks after 3 years he can become an important player. Now, I'm not too sure about this because his potential ability is not quite up there, and he doesn't like big matches. So we're going to go ahead and remove that and see if he'll take that. And he's absolutely fine with this. We'll finalize the promises, and we'll negotiate the contract. That brings us over to this screen. Now, you'll see a salary here, 3.25 million euros. That is what he is demanding. But altogether, it would cost us 3.92 million euros this season if we were to give him this contract with all of these bonuses. Now, we can negotiate this, and our agent that we are negotiating with has the patience to deal with some negotiations. And since we know that he was willing to go down to about 2.6 million, we will go not quite that far. We'll only go to 2.75 so we can continue giving the agent the bonuses that he wants. Maybe we can bring this down to 2 million. No, we cannot. So we'll leave that just like that. And then we'll bring down some of these fees down here. Maybe we'll bring it down, everything to about 11. We'll bring this down to about 7. We don't want any yearly salary raises, so we'll just get rid of that. And if he's asking for a wage increase if he gets international caps, we're just going to go ahead and remove that right now and see if he'll take that. Let's see. The exchanges in these discussions are early, but we're some ways apart here. Yes, I agree. So he wasn't happy with the salary reductions at all. So we'll say 2.8 this time. We'll still get rid of these two, and maybe we'll just give him the appearance fees. We'll suggest. Now he's losing his patience. He's not very happy with us. He hasn't budged at all with his contract demands. So let's just get rid of this here. Get rid of that there. And we will suggest this one last time. Now, that was unacceptable to this agent, which I am fairly surprised about. We will just have to walk away from this and hope that we can reopen negotiations at a later time. Now, if you fail in your contract negotiations, do not fret just yet. You will have another opportunity to open up negotiations in the future, but just not right away. If you can't come to any sort of agreement, you might just have to sell the player in the end. Now, if we were negotiating that contract for a player that we were trying to bring into the club, that failed negotiation would mean that the whole transfer deal would be off. And if we wanted to try to re-enter contract negotiations, we would have to resubmit a new transfer offer. But let's say they've accepted the transfer offer and you're about ready to accept the player into your club. Before you do so, there is a very, very important tab that we must explore first. And that is the registration tab. If we go over to Squad, Overview, and hit Registration, we'll come to this screen. Now, this screen is supremely important and will be different depending on the league that you are in. Every league has different registration rules. In Italy, for instance, we need to have at least 4 players trained in the club from their 15th to 21st birthday for a minimum of 3 years. We must also have 8 players that are trained in Italy for 3 years between their 15th and 21st birthday. If you can't fill out one of these, you will just lose a registration spot. So if I only had 7 Italian players, I'd only be able to register 24 players. Now, I know the Serie A has another registration rule that is not listed here, and in order to find that, we'll have to go ahead and click on the league here up top and go to their rules. Now, if we go ahead and scroll down here to transfers and registration rules, there will be a whole slew of different regulations that you must abide by in your league. Each league will be a little different, so make sure you're reading through this and getting all the information that you need so you don't sign a player that you can't register to your club. All right, let's say that the transfer window is closed, your team is solidified, and you are making your way through the thick of the season. What are some other very important things that you need to be aware of? One of those is the medical tab. And as you can see here, if we click on the medical tab, the overview will have the most important thing, the risk assessment, which you can also find right here. The risk assessment will tell you how risky it is for you to play your players. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to heed the medic's warning. Now, as you can see here, Bennacer has a very high risk of injury because not only has he played a whole bunch of games, but he also has a recurring torn thigh muscle. Now, you can also find this information in the tactics screen when you go and hover over somebody's little heart right here. If we hover over Bennacer here, it'll say, hey, look, he's at a very high risk of injury. He's got the torn thigh muscle. You must heed our warning. If you scroll through the top section here in the Medical Center tab, you will find a bunch of interesting information as well, including we have seen a 30% decrease in injuries so far this season compared to what we would have expected on average, and that is because of what we've done in training. If you go over here to the rest section, you will be able to rest your players. So for instance, with Bennacer, we could send him on vacation for any number of weeks here, but that means that he won't be able to play any games. Or we can just make sure he's doing no pitch or gym work so he's staying nice and fresh. You can just say, you know what, for 2 days, you're just going to relax. Don't do anything. Here you can also set the intensity of your training depending on how fit your players are. Now, if they're very exhausted, no pitch work. If they're just a little tired, half intensity. If they're halfway back to full fitness, they can start on their normal intensity training. And if they're all the way fit, you can double the intensity of their training if you feel fit. Another good way to manage the intensity of your training is by going over to the calendar. If you go to the calendar, you can set up how it is that your team trains. Now, I highly suggest that you do not manually set up your training schedules. It's very time consuming and totally unnecessary in my opinion. Instead, you can go over here to the staff tab, go over to responsibilities, scroll down to training, and you can assign your assistant coach to lead all the general trainings. When he does that, he will then set all of these up. And let's say he doesn't include any goalkeeper training. You can go in here, click one of the open tabs, go over to goalkeeping and say, hey, look, we want some one-on-one training with our goalkeepers that day. Hit confirm, and then you can say, yeah, I want to change it, but only this one time. I don't want to take control of all general training, just this one time. And voila, we've got some goalkeeper training in that week's schedule. Now that will increase the intensity of the training and cause risk for more injuries, but you need to have your goalkeepers trained, so it is worth the risk. Now, there are a few other tabs in the training section that we want to look at. Look at the units and just make sure that your players are in the right units. So for instance, I have Teo Hernandez in our attacking unit. because he is on an attacking duty when he is playing. So we want to make sure that he is training as an attacker. And on the other hand, we are training Benacer in the defensive unit because when he plays as a deep-lying playmaker on defend, and we want to make sure that he is training his defensive abilities as best as he can. You can also go over to the mentoring tab and create a mentoring group right here. We have Calabria, one of our team leaders, leading this mentoring group. And we have a couple players that are benefiting significantly from it. They were all benefiting significantly at the beginning of the season, but it looks like Muzambo is only getting a light effect from it. So we can go ahead and just get him out of here. The last tab we are going to look at is our individual training tab. Now, I like to go through this at the very beginning of the season and set up what positions my players are going to play. So for instance, Tamori, I make sure that he always trains as a central defender covering, because in our tactics, that is exactly what he's doing. He's playing as a central defender and he's covering. Now, if we go back to our training tab here and we go to Pierre Kalulu, you'll see that he is being trained as an inverted fullback on defend, but we also play him as a center back. So every now and again, I'll want to go here and make sure that he's training as a center back ball playing defender on defend. So that way, when he gets played in this position and we check his familiarity, it'll be higher than just half. Now, if we move him over here and see that he is being played as an inverted fullback, his familiarity is maxed out right there. And that is what we want to ensure when we are picking players for their positions. It's not crucial, but it is helpful. And there is one last thing that you can do in this training tab, and it is praise or criticize the player's trainings. Now, as you can see, Noah Okafor has a 10.0 in his training, and we would like to praise him, but I've already praised him this week. So let's go down to one of our other players, Pulisic, and you can see if when we click on him, you can either praise or criticize him. Go ahead and praise him. You've trained really well lately, and end the chat. That'll help his morale just a little bit and make sure that his training focus remains quite high. I could go down to Krunic. He doesn't have even a 7.0, and we can criticize his training level. You can say, hey, I don't like the way you're training. And he said, he says, I don't really agree with you. If that's everything, I'll see you later. So his training will probably just stay at that level, and there's very little that we can do about it. Now I have only one last section that I want to go over with you, and that is the Data Hub. Now, the Data Hub has a ton of information, but I want to show you what I find is the most important, and that is the next opponent section right here. Now, as long as you are scouting your oppositions, this tab will give you a ton of useful information that you can use to set up your tactics before a game. Now, we know that this player as a winger will be moving up and down these channels. This inverted winger will be moving around here. The Metzela will be moving out to the wing. This roaming playmaker will just be all over the place right here. And this inverted wingback will be replacing this Metzela. So we can see kind of how the team is going to be moving. And in that case, we can make some adjustments to make sure that we are defending them well. So for instance, if we go to our tactics, we know that their inverted winger is going to be cutting into this area right here. So instead of having Calabria as an inverted fullback, we can have him as an inverted wingback on defend. And when we are in possession, he will be moving into this area. So if we lose the ball, he will be in a perfect spot to clog up any room for that inverted winger to make a run towards the middle. Now, you want to be careful on adjusting your tactics too much, because your team will begin to lose familiarity with the tactic that you've employed. Instead, you're just going to want to use slight adjustments to your tactics so you don't shake up the entire dynamic of your play. Remember, adjust to your opposition's strengths and weaknesses, but don't lose your identity. Now, this Data Hub can also give you a whole bunch of information about your team, about your past matches, about your last 5, and can give you a bunch of very neat information.
You can get information about your different players, like scoring forwards. We can see that Lorenzo Colombo he's high scoring and high non-penalty expected goals. So when we're picking out our starting lineup, we might want to use Lorenzo Colombo considering his stats are so high currently. And if you go to the overview tab, you can also find some key findings about your team that your data analysts have highlighted. There's also one other way to analyze your team that's not in the data hub, but I kind of think it should be. Instead, it's in the squad planner. We go here and we go to reports. Now we've got a few different things that we can look at here. We've got our best 11, and we can ask any one of the staff to give their judgment. For instance, we can ask the head of youth development to give us an idea of who they think is the best, and they included a whole bunch of youth players. How funny. We can also look at the report. We can get some weaknesses of our team. We can see our strengths, and then we can work around those or strengthen some of them. Also go to our stats and get a whole bunch of useful information here. And the comparison tab, which I think is the most useful, you will be able to compare your team with the other teams in your league. So for instance, if we want to go to goalkeepers, we can check out or untick all of these players and just leave our goalkeepers and see how all three of our goalkeepers work against the other ones in the league. Perhaps we want to check out our mental strength of everybody besides our goalkeepers. And as you can see, out of everybody in the Serie A, our team, if you consider the defenders, the midfielders, and the attackers, have the best vision. Now maybe we take off the defenders, and you can see we still have the best vision in the league. Knowing little pieces of information like that can be very helpful when developing your tactic. So for instance, knowing that the vision is so high on our team, we know that we could try to exploit other teams with some sharp passing. There's a lot more about the data hub that we could get into, but we don't have a lot of time. So I implore you to go and sift through all the information that they have to give, because you never know what you will find that is useful. And that was going to be it, but I did want to include one more thing in this guide because I use it literally all the time, but I didn't know exactly where to fit it into this video. And it's a little feature on the squad tab. On the squad tab here, there is this drop down right here that is so infinitely important that I just must point it out. This will give you all the different menus that you can choose from to get information about your team. I use this all the time to quickly sort information and find some things out about my players. For instance, if I want to know who the highest paid player is, I just bring up the contract, I sort by salary, and voila. Now you know who your top paid players are. Now you might notice that their bonuses aren't on here. You could just right click here. You could insert a column. You can go down to contract and you could say bonuses. What's the appearance fees on my players? And voila, there are the appearance fees. Who's getting the most appearance fees? It's Leao and it's Pulisic. What do you know? The two players with the highest salary. Now, if you add a column in, it will automatically create a custom one, and you will see it right here, copy of contract. I've got one for the selection info as well that includes the performance in training, so I can always have an idea of how the team is training. If you just go to the regular selection info, you'll see there's no information about their training. Another important tab in this view is the playing time. You can sort by the agreed playing time and see how many players that you've promised regular starter, important player, or star player. And as you can see, we've got 11 players who have been promised up to regular starter, or 12 players. And that is one too many for our club. But as we know, Charles de Ketelaere is on the transfer list, so that will be 11 soon. This is all very, very useful information. And voila, that completes this guide. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know if I missed anything, if I said anything wrong, or if there is anything else that I should go over and perhaps make another video about. Now, I was thinking about making a tactics video, but there are so many of those out there that you will have no trouble finding those, so make sure to find one of those and check them out. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to check out the Let's Play, where I take AC Milan on a Director of Football challenge. That means that I have absolutely no control over the transfers or the contracts of our club. That is all in the hands of the Director of Football. And if you've made it this far, please leave a like, a comment, and be sure to subscribe for any other content that I will be putting out. Thank you so much, and have a good day.